So President Obama is going to unveil a fantastic new program, which is totally out of left field. I was not expecting this, and this is a pleasant surprise. What he wants to do is he wants to make, quote, community college free to those who maintain their grades. The program would be available for both half-time and full-time students who maintain a 2.5 grade point average and apply to community colleges that offer occupational training in high-demand fields or credit towards a 4-year degree. They say funding for this would just cover 2 years, so if there is a downside to this, that would be the downside right there. It's not broad. It's not for all 4 years. Also, the states and the federal government would share the cost of it, with 75% of the funding coming from the feds. Now, it bears mentioning that Tennessee has already implemented and launched a very similar program to this. In fact, we covered it on SecularTalk last year. We were one of the few outlets that actually covered it. Now, some people are saying that it's going to cost about $35 billion or so. That's not final. That's just essentially speculation, but that's what some people are saying. And my response to that is, so what? I could not care less. $35 billion? I mean, to put that into perspective for you, that would be a grand total of about 4 months of the cost of the war on terror. So you do the math. How long have we been fighting the war on terror? 14 years or so? So break that up into 4-month chunks. I suck at math, so I'm not going to try to do it live on air here. But how many times over could you have paid for this program? Answer: many. So if that's what we're talking about, if we're just talking about $35 billion, if we're just talking about the cost of 4 months of the war on terror, we absolutely should prioritize something like this. Now, it appears as if this is going to have to go through Congress, which is a giant because, what, you think the Republicans in the House and now the Republicans in the Senate are going to say, yeah, right on, college for everyone? I mean, it was Rick Santorum, Republican presidential candidate for the last election cycle. He argued that Obama was a snob for wanting people to go to college. I mean, how do you even respond to that? Basically, what that means, Rick, is that he wants people to have an opportunity at a successful life, because when you look at the numbers, it's clear that when you have a college degree, you have better job opportunities and you make more money. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't fundamental systemic flaws with the way the education system in America is structured. There are gigantic flaws, and I would like to fix those flaws. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, meh, education, smeducation, who cares? So, again, you have to give Obama credit for this. Now, you guys know I've been a very harsh critic of Obama on many, many issues, and rightfully so, I think. But every once in a while, he does something where you go, oh, that was very good. So take Cuba, for example. Essentially trying to iron out our differences with Cuba and make it so that we don't have a ridiculous policy left over from the 1960s. I mean, that appears to be common sense, doing negotiations with Iran and having a temporary peace deal and working on a permanent peace deal. Again, you have to give him credit for that. That's something that's great. So another aspect to this conversation is that it's not true when people try to do a full false equivalence, when they try to say, well, the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. That's not the case. I mean, sure, they are maybe 70 to 80% as corrupt as the Republicans, but they're not 100% as corrupt as the Republicans, and they're also not fucking lunatics. And every once in a while, what they'll do is they'll throw the American public a bone. Now, again, I get it that people hate this idea of picking from the lesser of two evils, and I hate it as well. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be step-by-step rational. And, of course, what I mean when I say that is you should work to change the system when it's not, of course, an election year. So you work to fundamentally change the structure of the system through things like the Wolfpack Amendment. And then when it comes time to vote in the primaries, you vote for the most progressive candidate you can. And then when it comes down to the general election, sometimes you have to hold your nose and vote for a Democrat who you know is going to disappoint you on a lot of issues, but every once in a while might do something that you say, okay, good. And look, especially when it comes to the presidency, because, for the Supreme Court alone, it's almost like you have to bite the bullet and vote Democrat, even if you hate the Democrat with a burning passion. So on this issue, like on a few other issues, you have to say, Obama, great job. But to be clear, the ideal policy proposal, what I would have done is I would have gone a step further. And I would have said, how about we make it free for everybody and we make it free for 4 years? That's the real way to go about this. And how about we eliminate all of the student loan debt in the country overnight? Now, this seems to be such a radical idea, but no, the radical idea is the system that we currently have in place, where you have to go into $100,000 worth of debt or more in order to get a piece of paper that makes it so that you can maybe get a decent job and maybe make a decent living. No, if you're structuring a society and you're structuring a government that is supposed to be civilized, one of the first things on the list that you take off the table that you say, okay, this is going to be funded through tax dollars, is education. And we have that in America up to a point. You can get public education up through high school, but then after that they say, all right, fuck off, now you're on your own. Even if you go to a public university right now, you still have to pay some tuition out of pocket. Why? Why shouldn't it be the same as it is when you go to second grade? Why shouldn't our tax dollars that we pay to the federal government and the state government, why shouldn't that go to education? If we're paying them money via taxes, shouldn't they do something for us with it? I mean, again, it appears to me to be a common sense position that instead of 57% of our discretionary budget going to war, fighting wars overseas that aren't making us safer and are killing innocent people, instead of that, how about we reallocate some of those funds to education? How about we reallocate some of the corporate welfare checks, the subsidies that go to the big banks, how about we reallocate that towards education and towards healthcare? If you disagree with that, I honestly think you've been had, and you're not being objective, and you're now not looking at the situation with an open and clear mind. And again, this is a step in the right direction, but I hope it is just the first step of many steps, and the end result is that we copy what a lot of European nations have done, where they say, yeah, essentially free college, and also free apprenticeships if you want to choose that.